So Tina, this I'm familiar with food banks, and I think I know what a rent bank is, but heat bank is new to me. So like maybe we can start with the basics. What is a heat bank?
Absolutely. So, Heat Bank was formed in realizing that some people in our community were living without heat. And just the same as a food
Hmm.
bank operates, it's a storage of energy basically to provide for people who find themselves without and in a place of struggle. It when we started in 2013, it was a physical storage of firewood. We operate in a rural cottage area, heavily forested, um, and wood heating is I would say, one of the primary sources of heat for people, um, or at least most people have a backup heat source as wood. And so being able to create stocks of emergency firewood in case people found themselves running low or in an emergency meant that we could provide a bit of a safety net for folks.
And you're based in Haliburton County in Ontario, right?
Yes, that's correct. Right on the base of Algonquin Park.
So you said you started in 2013, and when you started, it was primarily like a literal bank for firewood. And has that changed over time in the last decade?
Yes, we found that while firewood worked for some people, certainly it's not the only source of heat. And being able to create a pot of money that we could issue grants for other people who were heating. Typically, in our neck of the woods, that's propane or furnace oil. We do not have natural gas in our region, and then as well electricity. For some of our folks, though, they are living in cabins that may be run by generators, or they're living in trailers that might be heated with like 20 propane tanks. And so we have been really adaptable and try to respond to however that household is heating or keeping the hydro on as well, and being flexible with where our grants can go.
Man, that's awesome because typically programs from governments or utilities, they are siloed within a particular field, right? In Ontario, there's a ISO has programs for electric customers, and Enbridge has programs for gas customers. Sometimes they coordinate, sometimes they don't. So your approach is that it doesn't matter like what you're using to heat. We recognize that you might sometimes face challenges in paying for heating.
Yes. And certainly we we have been able to do that as a standalone charity. Our government funded, and so that gives us one. It gives us less money for sure. It means we have to fundraise the dollars that we operate with and that we give out, but it gives us the ability internally to set those parameters and to be more flexible. So yeah, but we certainly had to rethink things, like how do we get folks diesel, for instance, if that's what they're running their generator on. So there have been times where I've met people at gas stations and filled up tanks of fuel in the back of their car to haul back to their cabin. But yeah, and we do, so the programs that do operate within our region that are overseen by the Ontario Energy Board, for instance. So the LEAP program, Low Income Energy Assistance Program, that assists with, in our region, it's most applicable to electricity. We act as an intake agency for that program. So when folks call us, we can do what we call a screening, a benefits screening tool that helps to determine what programs would they be eligible for anywhere within our provincial government offerings, through our municipal government offerings, internally as our own grants. And there are a few other charities that we can turn to too if we've exhausted everybody or utilized everybody. There are certainly times where somebody's arrears or circumstances require several $1,000s worth of support. And so then that's knitting together. We can get a little bit from LEAP, we can offer a little bit, and we might turn to another charity as well. And really being able to pull those silos, as you say, together to help somebody through that difficult time.
You know, that's actually that's one of the things that I found very interesting and very appealing about the work that you're doing, because oftentimes in the energy efficiency world, we see programs across the country are being delivered by utilities, and they're all demand side management programs, right? With the focus of reducing kilowatt hours, electric kilowatt hours, or reducing therms of gas. And they're delivered by, I guess, professional program delivery agents who they have eligibility criteria, and they could do an audit or energy assessment and try to figure out what to help you reduce energy use in your home. But I've always thought about energy poverty as like it's not just about kilowatt hours of greenhouse gas emissions, although that's important, but the role that energy plays in well-being for people. And a lot of people don't live in comfortable homes because they don't crank up the thermostat high enough for them to be warm enough in their homes. And so there's a whole aspect of well-being in homes that I think we miss out when we treat these very narrowly as energy efficiency programs. And I think energy efficiency is a great tool to improve well-being for people in their homes, not just to reduce kilowatt hours or therms. And what I like about your program, I actually set up a monthly donation for your heat bank. Very modest, I will admit, but because I want to support the good work that you're doing. And so coming from that perspective, so what you're saying is in your program, people call in looking for heating assistance, but you're able to kind of help them connect with other resources that might be available for them beyond energy, beyond heating.
Yes. So within some limits. So first off, I just want to say thank you for that donation. Modest or not, particularly monthly donations help us literally keep our doors open. So it's greatly appreciated. Yeah. So I think that we find that people have a prompt to call us. So it's literally that, because we also operate food banks, the call might be they need food, or they need help with, they've got a disconnection notice from their electricity company, or they're running out of heat. But in that call, when we are trying to figure out what else, like what's happening, tell us your story. And as they're talking, there often is other things happening within their circumstances that they didn't know where to call. They didn't know that they could call somebody, and they didn't know what else was available to help with that specific circumstance. So that's the opportunity to say, if somebody has fallen behind in their heating, for instance, and their heating costs, but they have not been able to file their income taxes, well, let's one, getting you some heat right now, but also let's get the income taxes completed. So there might be child tax benefits, guaranteed income supplements, and certainly the carbon rebate that they're not getting. And if we can help them access that, then they're going to be okay next month. But I mean, those circumstances vary from household to household as to what's going on. So our staff are really good about listening to that, identifying what might be that underlying problem that somebody might not actually have realized is happening, or realize that they could call for help, and then connecting them with those community services. So that could be social assistance, it could be a housing application, it could be, we have a legal clinic, for instance, that can help with landlord-tenant issues or employment issues. Really, it's just trying to look at that next step. Like, we can certainly help in the emergency, but let's try to figure out if there's something else we can do that helps this household in the longer term, and provide those supports or the connections, right, with other organizations.
Wow. That is very interesting to me, because one of the challenges that provincial low-income energy efficiency programs have is reaching the hard-to-reach households. And in large part because issues of trust, community members that need supports the most often might not hear about a utility program, and the utility does not have any natural inroads into every community across a large province like Ontario, or where I live in Manitoba. And so oftentimes these end up being first come, first serve. There's not many touch points for people who need supports the most for like existing energy efficiency programs. But what sounds like what you're saying is that because people interact with your programs through, there's multiple entry points through the food bank and through other supports, you are seen as a organization that they can trust and at a point of contact for them to come for help, even if they come through looking for help on other things like taxes and things like that, and vice versa. So when they come to you looking for help with heating, you're also able to help them kind of just get a little bit ahead in life and just get caught up on the services that are available to them.
Yes. Um, your point around why people reach out, particularly the most vulnerable, the most disadvantaged. If you don't have enough to eat tonight, you don't care. Even if there was advertisement right in front of your face about free energy efficiency, but you're not eating tonight, you're not paying attention to that advertisement. Like your priority is making sure that your basic needs are met. And so if we can help kind of give that little bit of breathing space in terms of making sure people have food, they have the heat, they have hydro for that little bit, it's then that opportunity to give them that breathing space to digest the next thing. And I think that that's definitely a key piece of connecting energy conservation and energy efficiency businesses and organizations with grassroots organizations that we can help to facilitate those.
Is that, can I ask if that is actively happening? Because it seems to me one of the, I think because people will apply for the assistance, in some ways we're helping them with the problem they're having in the moment, but in the long run, reducing the energy use in their home will help them keep them more comfortable and reduce energy bills and save greenhouse gas emissions in the long run. So is there a mechanism through which, because I imagine people have received help from you, and you have probably a long list of people that have received help from you over the past decade. Is there any way through which like those people are receiving, get automatically enrolled into like a provincial energy efficiency programs? Are those things happening? Should they be happening? What are your thoughts on that?
I think so. For us, we try to tier the referrals, but certainly there are not automatic enrollments in any other program based on our assessment, for instance. But there is a really neat thing that has happened with the Save on Energy program within Ontario. And it actually just literally was delivered to our food bank this morning, and that is some energy kits. And so Save on Energy, forget offhand their delivery agent. At this point, it's just changed. But they attended our provincial food bank conference in the summer, and we're looking at ways of trying to connect with our clients at food banks across Ontario. And so one of the ways that they're doing that is actually shipping us energy kits to be able to go out with food hampers, and for us at Heat Bank to be able to connect with clients. So I think that that was a really good partnership on their part, and that is not a connection that has ever happened before. So I think that that's moving in the right direction for sure.
Awesome. And it's just occurred to me, this show is called Heating and Eating, typically because oftentimes a lot of households struggle with having to make a choice between heating or eating or heating and eating. And it occurs to me that you are maybe one of like very few people in this big and beautiful country that's working on both, right? On heating assistance and on the food bank food assistance. Do you see, what kind of overlaps do you see between heating and eating and the choices that people have to make? They seem related, but I don't quite have that story in my head.
Definitely overlap. Absolutely. And usually it's the juggle, right? If people are they're able to put food on the table, but they're not able to pay the mortgage or the rent or the utility bill, it's definitely a lot of overlap. From time to time, we do get folks that are more struggling with one or the other, I would say, just depending on their circumstances. We operate in an area of trade and barter, so certainly there are some people that are better apt or able to meet their needs, particularly with food or with heating, if folks are able to, for instance, get cheaper access to diesel fuel and they're able to top up their oil tank with that. they might need more help with heat bill or with, and I think in our rural area, because things like electricity there is some form of protection for low income consumers. So, for instance, they cannot be disconnected in the winter months. Whereas propane and oil, those companies are not regulated in terms of their interactions with their customers. So they may force a deposit, for instance, before even sending a truck to fill up your fuel tank. So in that case, somebody may decide that they're not spending any money on their food and they're relying entirely on a food bank. They'll default on the hydro, knowing that that's a problem that's going to, that's a future problem, in order to pay the propane company to put propane in the tank today. And I think that there's a lot of that juggling that you've just spoken to around the choices that people have to make in order to keep it up with one that has huge impacts across the board for sure. And more, it's becoming more about not just heat as well. We certainly are looking ahead the impacts of climate change in our region. In a cottage country, most of our housing stock they don't have air conditioning units. And as we see more high heat events, what impact is that actually going to have during the summer months? And what choices are people going to have to make in order to stay healthy and safe during those events? So a lot more, I think, coming down the line for sure.
And so can I ask you, if you had more resources, if you had like a wish list of things to where your program could go, what would that look like?
So certainly internally, I have really wanted to do more of a financial problem solving role, to be able to do more hands-on client work, like case management. So right now we operate with one staff. She is not full-time year-round, so she is reduced to part-time hours over the summer. And we can often give those, okay, so we've got the emergency solved for the next couple weeks. And we've been able to identify a few things that client might be able to connect with and do to help in the longer term. But our ability to help the most vulnerable clients, the ones who really need that extra support in making phone calls, perhaps because they don't have access to a phone or transportation or struggle with literacy, that person that helps actually go full circle, help walk through the door, if that might, that clients might need that extra hand of not just here's the phone number, let me help you try to connect with this person, but rather I will go with you to the appointment, help you absorb the information provided, help with that application filing. And I really think that is a need, a desperate need within our community that is not otherwise being filled. And I would love to put that in place. And then certainly, increasing our grants would be the next step. We have made a few increases, but the cost of fuel continues to increase, and certainly to be able to give more to people in need would be certainly top of my wish list as well.
And what would be a typical kind of, I don't know how to phrase this, but like a user profile of someone who would be using like your program, and has that changed over the years? Are you seeing like different, like a different type of family that needs more help than they did before, or what is the typical kind of people who need help and comes to you look like?
Sure. I would say that there is a very big spectrum. So we will see folks that are familiar to us. They may be accessing our food bank as well as income tax assistance, as well as calling us for assistance with heat on a regular basis. And those folks tend to be living on a fixed income. They usually are older, possibly single. And so living on a single income, fixed income, and that's just not keeping up. I mean, people were making heartbreaking choices before inflation happened. And so the level of need that they require now just to meet their basic needs continues to increase. And on the other end of the spectrum, we often are the first point of contact for somebody who otherwise was doing okay, but something's happened. Job loss, the bills have just kept adding up. And we are the first time that they've had to reach out for help. And so, completely different stories, completely different assets and resources available to those folks. And so I would say it really is a wide spectrum.
Right on. And thank you. That helps me understand just the story of how people are asking for help and needing help. And, one thought I had was it seems to me like the federal government in Canada now is trying to come up with an affordability program, and different levels of government are trying to take on are trying to step into a more leadership role in providing energy assistance program and affordability program and that sort of thing. And so I had a couple of ideas I just wanted to bounce off of you. One, I think, is that I think there's a lack of attention paid, I think, to the need for like immediate assistance and acute issues over chronic issues. And being able to diagnosing what those are and providing assistance to where they need them, like exactly what you talked about on one hand. And I think the other aspect of this is that like there's different people need like different levels of assistance to navigate complex systems of support. I mean, very few people can go online and fill out a form to apply for funding. Very few people have, like you'll have to interact with someone you don't know and possibly trust 3 times before you get an energy efficiency upgrade, because someone has to come do a walkthrough to your home. Someone has to come back again and install the equipment. Then someone has to come back and do a post-install evaluation. And so as governments are designing programs and policies to help with kind of, let's say, call them chronic issues of reducing energy use in homes and making them more climate ready, or helping them live in more comfortable homes, I would like to see those programs and policies come with like additional funding from other sources, perhaps even, to help with that kind of trust building process, that kind of like navigational support process, and help with the overall lifestyle, the kind of services that you're able to provide. And my ideal world, I'd love to see energy efficiency retrofits be paired with some kind of trust-based programs like yours, so you can help these households thrive and achieve success over the long term. Like, am I making sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like you're in my head. Provincially, I'll tell you this. So provincially, there is, I'm not going to remember the stream of funding, but it's given to municipalities to assist with housing. And our municipality, for many years over, has done a renovations program. So it is to income households with the highest amount of needed repairs on their house. So they have to be a homeowner, but the repairs have to be critical in order to access this small pot of money. But to get that small pot of money is a whole application process. And on occasion, when we have capacity, we've been able to assist clients with getting the quotes needed, getting the paperwork in, making sure they're meeting the deadlines, making sure they've filed it with the right people, going through what do they actually need to put on that application in order to accurately describe what's happening in their household. But I would say 95% of the time, all we can do is say to a client, okay, you don't have a heating system in your house. This would be a great program, a great grant to apply for. But if they don't have the ability to have somebody help them through that process, we know that they're not going to be able to do it. And so at a national level, it's exactly what you're talking about, that ability to really make sure that the people who have the most amount of barriers also have that connected support to help them overcome those barriers to access the programs that are specifically targeted for them, to them.
And am I right in thinking that Haliburton Heat Bank is the only heat bank in Canada, or do you know of others who are doing roughly what you're doing? Grassroots funded, like independent.
There actually is another within Haliburton County. There is another charity called Fuel for Warmth. They also are completely grassroots and they offer grants and firewood. They do not have paid staff, so slightly different approaches, but we definitely collaborate back and forth. Otherwise, you know what? As far as I know, I'm not aware of anything else.
Same, exactly. And so, if a community was listening in, right, like, do you have any advice for starting something like this? Because this seems like where in a lot of places in Canada, outside of cities, like where you're a little farther away from access to resources, it seems like something like this. It's very inspiring to me to see a grassroots effort like this come together. So, do you have any words of wisdom for folks who might be looking to start something like this in their own community?
For sure. Collaboration and starting with whatever you've got. Like, certainly on day one, did we ever envision that we would be able to support an almost full-time staff and be able to give out grants? That was beyond my wildest dreams at that time. We started organically. There were a number of churches and grassroots folks that were just collecting firewood and distributing it. And we gathered together and said, okay, what's within our ability to do right now? And if we all kind of collaborate, we might be able to do this better.
Mhm.
And we partnered with a local charity to access federal funding, which got us through a few years until we connected with a local business that saw what we were doing. I'll give a shout out to Rhubarb Restaurant in Haliburton County. If anybody is through this area, definitely stop in and support them. They operate an annual fundraising event that gives us a significant portion of what we need
Wow.
to raise every year. So my advice to anybody else starting is connect with your local people. Like, whoever has been doing something, whether it's your local food bank, your local church group, whoever has been already on the ground doing something, connect and talk about, can you collaborate? Are there things that are being unmet? Not every community, for instance, heats with firewood, but figure out what the needs are, figure out who your partners are, and don't be afraid to call your municipality as well and start having those conversations too. There's sometimes little pots of money that municipalities really, particularly now as folks are really focusing on homelessness, if you can make the case that what you're doing is homelessness prevention work, there can be definite municipal support there. And just start with what you've got and just keep going.
Thanks a lot, Tina. I am very grateful for you talking to me about this, especially because I didn't send you any questions in advance. We didn't rehearse this or plan this. You just jumped on and brought your wisdom and helped us understand something that innovative, genuinely innovative and fascinating and helpful for people in Haliburton. Is there anything that folks can do to help support your work in addition to donations and stuff like that? Is there anything that folks can do to help you do what you're doing and help improve it, or help you with resources, or help you in any way?
I would say, I mean, any advocacy work around improving basic income for folks alleviates the need for folks to turn to us. So just be aware of what's happening in your own province, and certainly at a federal level, and advocate for those changes. It certainly would be appreciated.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina. I really appreciate you joining me today, and I look forward to seeing your presentation at the conference in October.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm very much looking forward to that, and I quite enjoyed our chat today. So thank you for this opportunity.